Hello! Welcome to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with Jamie Soden and Michael Walsh. And before this podcast began, we were talking about a variety of things such as climate change and animal rights, human rights, all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty much up for talking about whatever my other co-hosts here talk about. Would one of you guys like to say your impersonal opinions, or do you want me to start?
Well, I can't remember which episode it was, right? But I will start off with the whole climate change thing. George Ortega said in one of his videos, in his discussions with Nick Vale, he mentioned something about disease vectors and, parasites or whatever. Um, and that at some point, climate change will become so severe that diseases will mutate faster than we can find treatments for, and that the human population will start drastically dropping. When did he say this would happen?
I don't remember when he said that would happen exactly.
But it is going to be severe. I do understand his point. It does sound logical because in warm weather, like in the tropics, for example, you do get some very serious illnesses like Ebola and all that stuff, and malaria. The malaria parasite, or even worms that live in your intestines and stuff. Now, of course, you can get these anywhere, but I'm just saying, you're more likely to catch these sorts of illnesses in warmer climates, and he does make a very good point. I mean, it does kill a lot of people, that malaria, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you said it was really bad in Africa.
Yeah, of course it is. That's why you need to be vaccinated before you go over there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and so you're saying it has a lot to do with the temperature of the climate.
well, of course, because if I remember science class right, cells divide quicker in warmer temperatures. I'm not saying like bacteria can't live in colder climates. I'm just saying that you know the way that cell division works is that it's more rapid, um, you know, in the tropics and stuff like that.
That's very interesting because I don't know too much about viruses or bacteria, but from what I've heard, supposedly either extreme heat or extreme cold is capable of killing bacteria and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true. But extreme heat has to be like boiling, beyond boiling temperatures.
Exactly. And so that of course those temperatures humans can't live at those temperatures anyway, so it kills the humans.
Another reason why malaria, well, Ebola also spreads in sub-Saharan Africa, besides the fact that it's hot and humid and those are kind of ideal conditions for these kinds of diseases to spread, is also the infrastructure just isn't there. They don't have sanitation systems, modern sanitation systems,
exactly.
and people there don't wash their hands as much over here because in a lot of developing countries there just isn't available clean running water, and there's not enough soap everywhere. I mean, when I was in Mexico, the restroom of like it's like had literally no soap. And if you go to the bathroom, well, if you live in a first world country, you just expect soap to be there. And then when you go to the sink and there's no soap, there's just a faucet and it turns water on, and you're like, what the hell am I gonna do?
Yeah,
And you're just gonna go back and eat your meal, and you realize, well, the people working at the restaurant, they're using the same bathroom you are, and they're not washing their hands while they're cooking your food, and it's like, oh man, I don't like that because I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, and that also spreads disease like crazy.
and also in Africa and India, a lot of people are malnourished due to poverty. So that is a contributing factor as to why so many people die of these diseases. Because if you're malnourished, your immune system is not going to be as resistant to all these bacteria and all that stuff. So you're more likely to die as a result of these diseases.
Does it affect the non-human animal population as well?
Of course it does, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Because the warmer climate allows the things like fleas and rats and roaches to live longer and become more abundant, and they spread diseases as well. And mosquitoes, definitely.
Yeah. If you remember anything about mitosis, Chandler Klebs, you'll know that in tropical climates, right, in comparison to colder climates, right, bacteria and other single-celled organisms, they mutate and divide much more rapidly. This is not extreme temperatures we're talking about. In the tropics, these are ideal conditions for life to evolve and spread and all this stuff. You know what I mean? So
So, what it could mean is that as climate change, as the planet gradually warms up, some areas that are perhaps cooler than the tropics will become more like the tropics, and then they will have the concern of diseases evolving more rapidly. And
exactly, and that's George Ortega's point. It's very logical. He I'd say he was telling the truth about that actually. That unless something is done about climate change, the human population will severely drop off, maybe even to extinction if we're very unlucky.
Wait, did he say the human population?
He said the human population would drop off at some point if nothing is done about climate change. Yeah.
Um, I don't think that the climate change will make it to the point where the human species is threatened, even if it gets a little bit warmer. And the reason why is this: because in the northern countries that are the developed countries, I don't think that disease would become that big of a deal in northern countries because the infrastructure is there and the health standards and the soap available to sterilize your hands and stuff like that. So I don't I think it could make outbreaks of diseases bad, but I don't really think it'll be enough to wipe out the human species.
yeah, I don't think it'll completely wipe out the human species, but it could wipe out the human population in certain areas.
If we're very unlucky, there is a scenario where the human population could go extinct as a result of complete ignorance to what is actually happening.
Yeah, well, another thing that's interesting is if something were to happen, such as something completely wipes out the electricity in a nation, so many people would die just from that. And I read something about like a solar flare could do such a thing. And I don't know much about that.
It could, it definitely could. A solar flare that was powerful enough and that directly hit Earth could fry the circuitry in our electronic grid and in our satellites and in our mainframes of computers, and that could just literally put the entire industrialized world into the dark, or even the entire world, or whatever side of the Earth got hit by that solar flare, and it actually could result in possibly in some parts of the world, like maybe years to repair that infrastructure.
And as a side effect, it will also damage the economy very severely as well, because that will mean people will have to replace their electronic devices, and this is going to cost a lot of money. It's no joke, man.
And it leads to an interesting thought, guys, about think about how the fact that there's I don't know how what the population of humans worldwide is now. I know it's over 7 billion.
It's 7.2 billion.
Oh yeah. Well, think about it. I think that the only reason that humans are allowed to maintain even that level of population is because we have modern conveniences, of machines and electricity. Because if you take away, the modern things such as, houses and apartments with heating and cooling, and you take away life support systems and all sorts of electronic things. I mean, that just shows how if let's just say that there was complete power outage in a nation for 1 week, I think that would be enough to kill a few million people.
But just think about this, Chandler, right? If climate change warms up the southern and northern hemisphere to the point where we have more of a problem with these, you know, diseases and stuff, just think if we had that in tandem with solar flares wiping out our national grid and stuff like that, and we had to go some time without electricity, wouldn't have a detrimental effect on human population?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you combine it like that. And also, from what I heard in that movie Inconvenient Truth, and I think George Ortega also wrote something about it in one of his books about the sea level rising by 20 feet or something because of the all the ice in the north and south pole like melting as it gets warmer and warmer, and all this ice raising the sea level so that entire countries even might go completely underwater.
Yeah, and the UK is going to suffer from it a lot, because it's only a small country. Actually, it's more comparable to an island, really, if you think about it. Where I live. Um, and this is not scaremongering. I actually seen a documentary on this, and what they're saying is factual. If the South Pole and North Pole melted completely, then most of our country would be underwater. So
Yeah, and then there's people who live on other islands all over the world, that there's Hawaii, there's Japan, the Japan islands, and I don't know about Australia because it's kind of it's a very big island or a small continent depending on how you look at it.
well, it's a very big chunk of land, so I wouldn't think they'd be affected too much, but it's still a problem nonetheless because any innocent life that gets destroyed by this is one life too many.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, guys, because when you think about it, another thing I wonder is even there will be some survivors, I'm sure. There's going to be some survivors of both humans and other non-human animals that aren't wiped out by these disasters. But one question is, will humanity learn to avoid in the future the same things that cause climate change to begin with?
That's assuming that we're still around to learn from it.
Right, that is a big assumption because, like, I think about it, guys. The few survivors there were, would they even be intelligent enough to be able to recreate society as we know it now, or would it be radically different?
Well, allegedly, the human race survived an ice age, in our long distant history. Um, when we were primitive and stuff. Apparently, there was an ice age when humans were around, like thousands of years ago.
How long ago was that?
I'll have to get a link up. I also saw a documentary on this. It was about ancient Britain. They were saying like I think it was over 30,000 years ago. I'm not sure. Our great great ancestors did survive an ice age.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that there will be some survivors regardless of what happens because, just the fact that all forms of life have an amazing ability to reproduce and nothing would be able to kill all of them all at once.
What do you guys think is the largest contributor to climate change?
Well, from how I understand it, a big part of it is actually the animal industries, the meat industry and stuff like that. Something about methane. I don't know. George explained something about that, and I've read about it. And of course, then there's also all the use of oil and the gas emissions and stuff like that. So I think those are the main things.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just saw this documentary a few weeks ago called Cowspiracy. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't remember if I've seen it, but I think I've at least heard of it before.
It's new and I think it just came out like a year ago and it just got released onto Netflix about a month ago. So if you have Netflix or I don't know if there's Netflix in the UK or whatever its equivalent is, then you should check it out. And it has some really like alarming statistics. So it basically says that the agriculture industry for like for animals for them to be turned into food is basically the number one contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation of the world's forests. It says that animal agriculture is responsible for 91% of Amazon rainforest destruction. And so for palm oil, 26 million acres have been cleared. I'm not sure what I don't know how far that goes back, but for agriculture, it's 136 million acres has been cleared for making farms for animals. And some other statistics are one single hamburger requires 660 gallons of water to make, which is the equivalent of 2 months worth of showering for the average person. So that's just like a ridiculous amount of water it takes just to make a single hamburger. And there have been times where like I've bitten into a hamburger and I'm just like, I don't want it anymore. And I just threw it out. And I didn't realize that it takes 666 gallons of water on average to make it.
Yeah.
And so I mean, the documentary definitely makes the argument that you should really seriously minimize your meat intake, not only of meat but also of fish as well, because the fish reserves in the ocean are being seriously depleted, and they're probably not going to be around for another couple decades, given the rate at which we're eating. And I mean that these kind of statistics was enough for me to honestly become a vegetarian. So I just became vegetarian recently,
Yeah,
and giving up
it's
meat.
I'll be able to watch it. I mean, I've got it up on my screen right now, and after I'm done with this podcast, I might actually sit and watch it actually. But
I
yeah,
highly urge you to watch it. It's really good.
yeah, I do believe you. There's a lot of considerations. I mean, not just the amount of water it will take to make a hamburger, but also the amount of bad cholesterol that's in this type of meat, because there's been like some fear mongering about cholesterol and all this stuff. Um, but what some companies won't tell you is that there's bad cholesterol and there's good cholesterol. You need good cholesterol because obviously that gives you energy. But bad cholesterol, that's going to stick to your arteries. And this type of stuff is found in red meats, isn't it, Chandler?
Yeah, from how I have heard and read about stuff, that our bodies can't really handle like animal fat. It's totally different from like plant fat and stuff like that. There's so many health benefits to eliminating animal products from your diet, aside from other ethical issues and the climate change thing.
Because when people hear the word cholesterol, they immediately panic and they don't seem to understand the difference between bad lipids and good lipids. I did my research on this a while back. It's the low density fats that stick to your artery walls. The high density ones are the ones that could just slip through you quite easily without getting stuck to anything.
Yeah, and we gotta admit it would be a much better use of resources for humans to be eating plants and drinking the water, and that will consume less plants and less water than the animal industry and relying on meat for food and stuff like that.
Yeah, and plant fats, especially what's found in nuts, I think it's called polyunsaturated. Um, they have the high density cholesterols that we need, and people should stop you know worrying about that because that's not the stuff that's going to kill you. What is going to kill you is the stuff that you find in red meats, and it's very bad for you. It will cause coronary heart disease, in your late 30s to 40s if you're obese. There is a high chance that you'll get it, especially if you've got high blood pressure. So you should seriously consider a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because there's so many levels to this, because there's the how it contributes to climate change, there's for our own health that will live longer and have fewer problems if we eat a plant-based diet. And then there's also, for me, most importantly, It's about, not treating these other animals as lesser beings than humans.
Oh yeah, that too. I mean, we're killing animals when we don't have to. I mean, it's proven that we don't need to kill animals. Um, and people will be saying, well, what about vitamin B12? You get that from fish. And I would just say back to them, well, why don't you just use vitamin supplements? You can get those in pills now.
And I actually take a B12 supplement that I got for really cheap too. So yeah, it's there really has to be at some level plant sources of all the nutrients we need. You know, um, and it's obvious that there's so many animals that live, long, strong, healthy lives just eating plants. You've got elephants, you've got horses, you've got some rabbits, there's all kinds of cool things like that.
Slaughtering animals, and then keeping the meat fresh and all this stuff. Imagine the amount of work it would take to, market this stuff to people and make sure they don't get food poisoning at the same time. I mean, it's a lot harder to do than to grow a vegetable like in soil.
Yeah, and you would think that it would be more practical to focus on, plants than animals because for one thing, plants don't run away from you. They stay in the spot where they're growing. They are much easier to manage in so many different ways from a practical perspective.
Yeah, just add water and sunlight.
Yeah. And another thing that's interesting, guys, is that see, humans have because they have, machines and there's mass production of plant foods, not as much as there should be, mind you, because there needs to be more plants instead of animals being raised in order to feed the whole human population. But I mean, it's different now than it would have been, thousands and thousands of years ago, before machinery, before, people could grow as much plants as they do now.
Well, you only have to go back a couple hundred years actually for that.
How did that begin? Like, like, how long ago did things change as far as how food was grown?
Agriculture started about 10,000 years ago, but even then it was, relatively small scale. And then, in the Middle Ages, it really kind of like started picking up, and by like 1800, and like then you started getting like industrial farming. And then by the 20th century, that's when you get like the modern farm where we just uh, grow. You have machines doing all the planting and picking and all that stuff.
Hey Chandler, I'll have to try and find that documentary about the ancient humans and stuff about, over 30,000 years ago about humanity surviving the Ice Age. It was very interesting at the time, but I can't seem to remember the name of it. Michael Walsh, do you know any documentaries about humans in ancient times?
Oh man, yeah, not off the top of my head. What is it specifically about? Is it about agriculture or like just
No, no,
in
no.
general?
I was talking to Chandler about how humans survived the Ice Age. To be completely honest, I forgot exactly how we survived it, but we did come through. Um, that's what they were saying.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't around back then.
Well, the Ice Age was it did technically affect the whole Earth, but if you were living in Africa or like South Asia,
Mm.
it wasn't cold. It was mainly cold up in the north, like Europe and North America and like Northern Asia was affected really bad. But if you
And
were in
you,
Africa, you were still warm.
oh, of course, yeah, because the first humans they started off in Kenya, didn't they? So
Yeah. The only
um,
thing is that the Ice Age, I think, brought about like different kinds of droughts to Africa, and that drought may have inspired um, our ancestors to leave Africa and go out into Asia and eventually Europe. And there was also a volcano, I think it was Krakatoa in Indonesia, which affected the climate in Africa, and that also made it so that living conditions were more difficult. And so they left and went into Europe around like 50,000 years ago where they encountered Neanderthals. And right around that time was pretty much the Ice Age, and it was like much, much colder in Europe than it is now and harder to live.
And back then, humans were ruthless savages. I mean, people were just killing each other every chance they got, because there weren't much rules and regulations back then. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, there was no Obamacare, and there was no federal government or anything like that.
No, it was just complete anarchy back then.
There was no National Health Service.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that, and there's a lot of things there probably weren't. There probably weren't national sports games televised and and weird stuff like that. And of course, there wasn't the internet or podcasts, which is kind of sad.
Well, people back then were pretty much hunters and gatherers, you know. There was no agriculture. That didn't start until around 10,000 years ago. So prior to that, it was really just people living in small tribes of maybe up to 100 people, and you just went out and hunted your food. And if you didn't if you didn't catch the animal, if you threw a spear and the animal got away, you might not even eat that day.
Yeah, so back then, humans were more carnivores, sort of like, you have of lions and wolves today, because those animals don't have a means of doing agriculture necessarily.
Yeah, but now that we've got the means to do agriculture, there's no longer a need to be carnivorous. There's just not a justification anymore. Uh, back in ancient times, we didn't know any better. We had to be carnivores because otherwise you would starve to death pretty much. I mean, where were you going to find wheat? Where were you going to find corn? You just weren't going to find it, were you?
Yeah, so basically, it's more like those who did hunt and eat meat, those were the people who survived and reproduced. And so it became a basically a habit that humanity's had for a long time, and yet times have changed so that now it's not really it's not, if you live in a first world country or whatever, generally you can get by with eating only plants, and you don't have to hunt it or kill anything.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, you get better forms of fat in plants. You don't get any of this nasty stuff that sticks to your arteries and gives you heart attacks, at very early ages. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jamie, what is the political situation over there in terms of climate change denial? Because here in the U.S., we have a whole political party, the Republican Party, that is pretty much the majority of them. They don't even acknowledge that climate change is even happening.
I don't follow politics all that much, but I like to say they're at least trying to do something about it. I mean, we've got wind farms over here in England now. It's not all bad.
I heard that the Netherlands has 100% of its electricity through renewable energy means.
And there's been talk about using fusion as a fuel source, but it hasn't been put into action yet.
Yeah, we're still away from fusion. That's gonna be. It takes a lot of energy to make it, but once you get it, you get a lot of energy, a lot more in return. But I don't know all the science on that, but they've made some breakthroughs recently. But I think we're still maybe 10, 20 years away.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with fusion, you've got to start off with hydrogen atoms, aren't you? Because hydrogen is a very light element.
And Jamie, weren't you saying something about people converting to solar power?
Well, solar power is a very good alternative. The problem is, it's a very expensive option because solar panels cost a lot of money, and to buy these things in bulk, you'd just be burning your wallet, for a short-term investment.
Yeah, but it would be long term, assuming someone could do that long term, they would save money. It would just take a long time.
Yeah, it would take a long time to get back the money that you spent. What would be nice, if it could be done, is solar powered magnetic monorail. I mean, that would be nice. The maglevs.
What?
The maglevs that they use on these monorail trains.
Oh, magnet trains?
Yeah, magnet trains. Yeah, I mean, they could power those using solar energy at some point. I mean, that's an interesting. That's kind of an interesting concept. I mean, I'd like that to be. I'd like to see that being done, but I probably won't see that being done in my lifetime.
Yeah, I don't know much about these new technologies really.
Maglevs are from what I hear, they're really expensive actually to make right now.
Yeah, that's the problem. But if you had them like solar powered, think of the money that the company would save in the long term.
Hey guys, here's an interesting thought. Let's suppose that you had the option of like living an old-fashioned life where you can live out in a pretty decent climate on a farm somewhere, but there's no electricity. Would you be able to live like that?
Definitely not. I gotta have the internet, man. I can't live without the internet and electricity in general. I need hot water when I turn the knob, and I need music, like, being able to have like recorded music that I can play. And I need the internet. It's just I could never live on a simple Amish lifestyle.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if a solar flare was bad enough, you do realize that it could wipe out the internet servers, and they will be without the internet quite a long time.
Yeah, well, it'll wipe out the infrastructure. I don't think the data would get lost, but the processors inside the computers will get fried, and that could be out for like years. And so my job is done entirely online. So I have no idea what I would do for a living if the internet went out for a year in the US. I'd have
Well,
to go back to
it's
like hunting and gathering.
Well, it depends on what kind of damage it will do to the storage drives. Because if the storage drives get an electrical surge, the data will just get wiped on them, and that will be a huge problem for companies that rely on data.
You also have to consider what that would do to the information, sort of like, the books. Because these days, there's been a moving away from traditional printed books towards ebooks and stuff. And if all like the internet and all the data was all destroyed and stuff, like there would be people would lose a whole bunch of digital data, some of which they had bought. That it'd be lost, and that's kind of bad.
Yeah, but that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that businesses will go bankrupt because of this. Like Amazon, right? They heavily rely on internet service because their business cannot run without the internet. If the internet were just Say if the data was completely destroyed, corrupted, whatever, by an electrical surge as a result of a solar flare, Amazon will go bankrupt, Google will be finished, and it will do some serious economical damage to Microsoft as well. So,
Yeah, that I mean that would be really kind of scary. I mean, it would change the whole world. You know, see, here's the deal. Like a long time ago, back before computers and the internet, and before people learned how to use electricity, people were living like the Amish. They were living, without these modern conveniences we have.
but people have to get used to it because nature wins in the end, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that could happen to us, if such a disaster struck like that. But like, I often think about it like I've thought long and hard. Could I handle an existence like that without computers and the internet and that kind of stuff? And like I think that I might be able to, because I'm just the kind of person who I happen to hate the noisy busyness of the city. And even though I love the internet and I love talking to you guys, I would be really sad if I couldn't talk to you guys because the whole computer and internet fry.
The same, but I'm just preparing myself for the worst because in the next solar maximum, um, it could happen, man. You know what I mean? And if we go without the internet, that means we can't do our podcasts. It'll just be bye bye, friends on Skype. I won't be able to talk to any of you ever again, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, we could become pen pals, but that would be about it.
Yeah, we could send each other like letters through airmail or something, but we'll have to know each other's postcodes for that to happen.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. That's the one thing. I mean, the reason that the internet is so valuable to me is because of the friends that I can talk to online. I mean, that's the main thing. There's also the fact that I love getting Kindle books and I love blogs and I love YouTube video documentaries and stuff like that.
What about the bigger question of like how would you make a living and even feed yourself? Because you wouldn't have a job, I presume.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. Like for example, I work at Hy-Vee, and the grocery store is completely electrically powered. I mean, the cash registers, the conveyor belts, the refrigeration systems, the lights, everything there is electric. So without electricity, the grocery stores are gone. So yeah, that would be bad. So basically what would end up happening is I would turn into a wild horse that's going around grazing on the plants I find.
I will watch Cowspiracy after I've done this podcast with you. I've just got it up on my screen ready to watch it. Is
Yes.
there anything we need to talk about before we finish this, Chandler?
I don't know. Yeah, we've been talking for about 41 minutes or whatever. So yeah, if you guys are done, we could end this episode, I suppose.
I think Michael wants to carry on.
Uh, I don't know. I don't really have much more to add right now.
Yeah, this was kind of an interesting episode. I mean, yeah, because we talked about climate change, we talked about animals, and we talked about electricity going out, and all sorts of interesting topics. So yeah, this is fun. It was a kind of just a relaxed talk, guys.
But it's the truth. I mean, people will have to get used to the fact that if our electricity got taken out and if our internet got taken out, we'd have to rely on old-fashioned means like books in a library. I mean, I don't think books in a library should be gotten rid of entirely because we'll need them one day. Trust me on that one. We'll need.
Well, because a lot of our knowledge and history is digital now, if we lost all that digital records, like a huge swath of information would be lost forever because
Exactly.
it's not in physical print anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I don't think we should get rid of books entirely. I think we should have like important information still in our local libraries in books, just in case such an event would happen.
Yeah, it would be tragic to lose all that information.
People will have to get used to it, like it or not. This is a reality we're going to have to face, and it could happen tomorrow. It could happen in 10 years' time. Who knows?
Yeah. Who really knows, man? That's the thing is we can't predict anything. So, is that a good place to end this episode?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay, well, you've been listening to Impersonal Opinion with Chandler Klebs, Jamie Soden, and Michael Walsh. We've talked about a whole variety of things. Hope you found this entertaining and educational in some way. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.